Today, I am joined with Bob Slaven, and I'm very excited for us to sort of do this production again, which we've done several times before, on the roles of the Granite Quarries and the history of Blue Hill. This is a really interesting story, and we're grateful to Bob for sharing his knowledge on this and for having given us an insider's look at some of the quarries which are located on private property, which have been in the Slaven family for quite some time. Now, in order to talk about the Granite Quarries in Blue Hill, which goes way back, you need to have some sort of local street cred to show that you do have local connections to the area. And here you can see Bob and myself with different iterations of great-grandparents in the local cemetery, Seaside Cemetery. And Bob, you're here with your great-grandfather?
True.
Benjamin Saunders. And you see I'm there with the Darlings as of Jed and Darling Island in Blue Hill Bay. And they're neighbors at Seaside Cemetery, which was kind of fun to discover when Bob and I went out looking at gravestones. So today we're going to be talking about the quarries and specifically, mostly about the Chase Granite Quarry. So Bob, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chrissy. Hello, everyone. I'm Bob Slaven, as Chrissy has identified me, and I'm proud of the fact that I was born here in Blue Hill. And I wonder how many other people were actually born here. So the family goes way back. My father's mother moved the family here for summers to Blue Hill for summers in the late 1800s because they were living in New York City, and who wants to be in New York City in the summertime, hot summertime. Later, I'll be showing you a picture of the summer cottage she had built, which the family considers their spiritual home. And the family legend has it that the Slavens took over Chase Granite in, again, the very late 1800s. And the legend has it that my great-great-uncle won it in a poker game, which was a very substantial stake to be playing poker over.
And so here we're looking at a photo of what we believe to be the Westcott Hinckley Quarry, located now on a Blue Hill Heritage Trust piece of property. But we don't know for certain, but we think that might be where it is, off of the East Blue Hill Road. And we'll see photos of where we think this is today in a bit.
And we'll begin, this is not a genealogy presentation, folks, but there is an important predecessor. We have an important predecessor who established his name was M.K.Chase, as you see here, and he established the Chase Granite, which is where we now live. Some of us now live, moi, for one. So the Chases are well established in Blue Hill. And if you go to the Seaside Cemetery, you not only see Chrissy standing next to a gravestone, but you see the whole Chase family. And it's not commonly known, but Mary Ellen Chase, the very well-known author, is interred in the Blue Hill Seaside Cemetery. And she was known when she was at school here as a preteen as Minnie Ella Chase, and probably it's just as well that she opted to change it to Mary Ellen Chase. And Mary Ellen's home was built by a well-known local architect and builder whose name escapes me right now. I have it here someplace. But Captain Chase, as he was known, he was born in March of 1823, and he had some fascinating events at sea, fascinating experiences at sea, which, however, are not unique to the granite industry, which is the subject of our discussion today. So I will not be providing you this go around with those histories. But if there is time at the end, if anyone wants to hear a little discussion about Mary Ellen Chase's grandfather, Melatiah K. Chase, I would be happy to provide that discussion. So we are, I wanted to comment on this slide. How did I miss it? Well, that's because it was way back there. Yeah. This is a typical gang of quarrymen in the quarry. What was the quarry?
Westcott Hinckley Quarry.
Westcott Hinckley Quarry, which I think this properly is. I had explored the Westcott Hinckley Quarry when I was a teenager myself, and it's of course all overgrown, but this could be the a very well-known granite cutting operation. And look at the size of those chunks of granite. Now, granite weighs about 150 pounds per cubic foot, okay? Cubic foot is yay by yay by yay, give or take, and that's 150 pounds. And each one of these is probably 10 cubic feet, damn near a ton. So the word to the wise is, don't drop it on your foot. And actually, there is a surprising, there has to have been a lot of accidents in the quarries. There were a bunch of quarries in Blue Hill. There were a total of 24 at one juncture. And if there were 24 quarries and each of them had as many men as are shown in this picture, which is, I think, 20, then it's a good source of labor. And the men working here are exposing themselves to considerable danger as a matter of routine. So I'm not going to talk about how you get the quarry out of the, how you get the granite out of the quarry, at least not now. And instead, let's go back to where we were, which was Melatiah K. Chase. As I said, we're not going to tackle the geology of the granite and the resulting changes to the landscape. But let's note that the Blue Hill granite, which is part of the Ellsworth schist, is dark. It's gray, but there is a touch of pink in it, whereas the Stonington granite is recognizably pink. And many people prefer the pinkish look for granite that they're going to use in their building projects. And I also, as I said, I'm not going to get into the mechanical and industrial aspects of quarrying, but just moving those blocks around, as you can see, is a lot of, is a major problem, major issue. And I would like to, next time I'll catch it when we go by it, I won't now, point out that there is a, in the State of Maine Museum in Augusta is a vehicle known as a Gallimander. And the Gallimander or Gallimander has enormous rear wheels and steerable front wheels, and is typically driven by a team of oxen. And that's how most quarries move the granite from the quarry itself down to where it's shipped. But Chase Granite doesn't follow that protocol. But not going to get involved in that. Remember that this is before the day of internal combustion engines, and the steam provided a different environment to work, equally as dangerous as internal combustion. Extremely dangerous line of work. And it's strange that the record really doesn't show that many fatalities. Now, these workers are either quarrymen or stone cutters, those with the front line of working in quarries. And the name quarryman has now been changed to quarrier. And I wonder if quarryman is not politically correct.
Oh.
And there is sort of a hierarchy. You begin as a quarryman and then make your way to being a stone cutter and then becoming a foreman of the various holes from which the granite is being extracted. So we'll come back to Captain Chase at some juncture later if there's time. Just to keep things straight, Mary Ellen Chase, the Chase family, beginning with Captain Chase, when he came ashore from going to sea, lived in the house on Union Street, just up the street from where we are right now.
That's right.
Wherever we're going to be, and was designed and built by the very well-known builder of houses, ships, and coffins, Thomas Lord. Despite the fact that Mary Ellen Chase is Blue Hill's most famous author in a whole squad of famous authors, her house is little recognized, and there's no historic plaque, and it is, of course, a private residence, so please don't go knocking on the door and asking if you can come in and look around. The house was built in 1845, not by M.K. Chase, but by someone else in the village whose name escapes me. There are, in addition to a lot of names that are well known in Blue Hill to this day, look at this, Gwendol and Carter and Peters and Hinckley and Westcott. There's also, in the heart of town, there was, I'll have perhaps a pointer, I can just aim at it. There was the home of, did we do away with Mr. Barrett?
Nope, we'll get to that in the next one, I think. So okay. Mr. Barrett's home was right here.
In the heart of town.
In the heart of town. So you have the Chase family home, but the Granite Quarries out here. And then you have Charles Barrett's quarry, which is my ancestor, and we're not sure if they ever quarried there or not, but their home was right here in town. And this is a photo of it. And this is the corner of Main Street and Pleasant Street here, Route 15.
And when I was in school here, this is early in World War II, I walked from the Consolidated School every morning. I walked to the Consolidated School every morning and then walked home for lunch, and walking home involved walking by Dr. Barrett's home on the corner of Union and Main Street. And one day, and then I walked back the other way, going back to school. And one day I noticed that there, over in the left front as you face the building, there was a nice field of tulips. And so I thought I would be very sweet to my dear mother and bring her back a bunch of tulips at the end of the day. This was not appreciated by either Dr. Barrett or thus my mother, and more so my grandfather. Okay, that's a little vignette. And no one knows where the Barrett Quarry is at the present time.
That's right.
So right now we're going to start a virtual tour of the Chase Granite Company.
That's right. And the reason this is a virtual tour, we'll just say, is because these quarries are on private land. And if you don't know your way and you don't know the quarries well, they can present some dangers. And so as such, they're not open to the public for viewing. So this is a really nice opportunity for folks to get to see what these quarries in the woods look like, since they're not accessible to the public.
Okay, we're
All right. So here we've got the old
here,
1885 map.
and it shows, and if I have a pointer, it shows a road which no longer exists coming off of what is now the East Blue Hill Road. In those days was the Wood Point Road, and actually is still the Wood Point Road, and making a sharp turn and going up through the woods. Nowadays, this is in part bypassed by a trail, which is shown on this map as a dotted line. And the trail has the very unimposing name of Drunkard's Path. Now, at the East Blue Hill end of Drunkard's Path, you see there's a couple of structures. That's where Phyllis Pemberton lives, and there's a couple other houses back there now, including Butler Smythe. But the bottom line is no one wanted to use Drunkard's Path as their address, and so now it has an alternate name.
The very suitable Pemberton Lane, yes.
Yes,
And
Pemberton Lane.
what's interesting on here is also folks can see these blue circles where my cursor is, and these are the quarries that we're going to be exploring together. And looking at this on the map of the whole Blue Hill Peninsula, here's where we're located in this circle here. Yeah, so we're going to look at what these quarries look like today. We'll start with pond number 1.
We're starting at the top of the hill, not very far from the East Blue Hill Road. And it is a private road, but it's a particularly attractive quarry for one reason, because it has granite ledges sloping into relatively shallow water, whereas the other quarries we see, most of them, you don't know how deep it is and what's down there waiting to grab you when you jump in. So this is pond number 2, which is right across, as Chrissy said, which is right across from pond number 1, which, surprise, surprise. And it is the largest in terms of surface area. Surface area is what, maybe an acre and a half. And its depth, we do not know how deep this quarry is. Quarry number 1, you can see most of the bottom, but quarry number 2 is beyond the reach of someone with a bamboo rod trying to just sound the bottom. Now, something else you'll notice on this particular shot, this particular view of pond number 2 is the remains of a trestle. In the absolute middle of the picture, there is, you can barely make out, but there was, and in fact, as recently as my lifetime, that was a trestle built on granite, they call them piers, that crossed the pond so that they didn't have to go around it and devote time and effort to building additional railway, an additional railway. And so as recently as my younger days, you could actually see where the railroad on the trestle on this pier, there was another trestle maybe visible, almost visible there, and the railroad disappeared down the hillside. And I'll talk a little more about railroads as we progress. But this is, we call it pond number 2, but it also back in the early days provided ice for the owner's house, and also water.
And this is kind of a fun photo when we have had a live audience doing this before. We asked people to tell us if this photo was upside down or right side up.
Yeah.
And because these ponds are so tranquil and beautiful, sometimes with their reflection, it's hard to tell. But this photo is indeed upside down, and everybody has gotten it wrong. And you can tell because you have this bush growing out from from the top of the corner there. So that's just kind of our little joke there.
And moving further down the trail, which joins these ponds, these 6 ponds, you can find some small bodies of water which don't even qualify as ponds and are actually vernal pools. They're filled with water in the springtime after snow melt and springtime rains. But they are, in most cases, they dry up in the summertime.
That's right. Wonderful habitat for
salamanders.
Yes.
And frogs.
That's right.
Now, I had mentioned the railroad that carries the granite blocks down to the stone schooners, and I'll talk about them a little later, down to the stone schooners on at the dock, at the pier, at the water's edge. But the Chase Granite Quarry is unique in Hancock County in that the granite traversed from the upper parts of the hill down the hill to the water's edge in a railroad. That is to say, a narrow gauge series of cars that were pulled up the hill by a cable, and down the hill, the gravity took them down, and in so doing, raised the next car in line up the hill. You still find pieces of the industrial equipment that was used in these the railroad and also in the cutting sheds. And if you walking up and down the edge of the railroad, which is just a little bit off of this picture here to the left, as Chrissy says, watch your step, because there are, I can locate 3 built up wells, and they're not all that deep. I have sounded them with a stick, and they're only 3 or 4 feet deep, but the chances are excellent that that bottom couple of feet includes a lot of bones from deer and other critters. But the pumps that pump the quarries dry require, they're steam-driven pumps. So you need water to get them started to pump the water out. And you need a reliable source of water. And that's why our predecessors put in these fairly substantial surface wells. So there was always water to start the pumps that are going to pump the water out of the quarry pits. And as you go through the woods, you find reminders of humans' mark on the land with odds and ends of interesting pieces. This looks like a flywheel off of an engine of some sort. And this is a piece of cable which has been lying in exactly this spot for over 100 years, probably 125 years, and hasn't completely rusted away yet, but it's getting there. And this is called a staple, and you find these throughout the woods of the quarries, in that it secures the guy lines that hold the derrick up that's going to lift the granite out of the pit onto the railroad car. And you find these throughout the woods. I mentioned the Gallimander, and it is an unusual vehicle, but it's what's required to lift a probably 1 ton block of granite a couple of feet off the ground and then take it down a moderately steep hill. And I don't know how the brakes worked, but they were obviously worked very well.
They hope.
They hope. Back to ponds.
Back to the walk.
Number 3 pond, attractive. And as I mentioned, there are bits and pieces of granite throughout the woods. Sometimes they were chiseled out of a wall of granite, and one corner broke off. So rather than try and repair it, they would just drop the piece of granite on the ground and cut out another one. And so you find pieces of granite, odds and ends, throughout the woods.
Yes, you can see those often along the trail across the way at Penny's Preserve and Peters Brook, where the Westcott Hinckley quarry was. You can see scattered chunks of beautiful granite all over the place.
And some of them are big chunks of previously hand carved granite, but the stone cutter made a mistake on something, and so there's a big chunk of granite just sitting there in the woods, waiting for someone to come along and claim it and drag it down the hill, put it on their driveway, like me, for instance. We're up to pond number 4.
Yes.
Still coming down the hill. We've already gone maybe half a mile wandering through the woods.
Yep, we started right up here at the top and went from 1 to 2 to 3 and then over to 4.
Yep. Darling Island, by the way, is named after one of Chrissy's ancestors. Jedediah darling,
That's right.
except there's a whole bunch of darlings and there's a whole bunch of Jedediahs,
That's right.
and I can't necessarily keep them apart.
Mhm.
Um,
And as you said, Bob, sometimes these ponds can be misleading. And so that's why it's really important that people not go jumping off the cliff faces
Yeah.
into the water here,
no,
because you just don't know what's under the surface. Sharp rocks and various things. So
no.
and here we are on pond 5.
Pond 5.
And you made quite a nice sighting here once.
Was this pond 5 or pond 4? Pond 5. I was sitting at the edge of the pond. This is a relatively small quarry, except you don't know how deep it might be. And a critter, namely an otter, came swimming by, heading up to its lair under these rocks. And it was a mama, what was it? Mama otter. And I could tell it was Mama Otter because her cub was following along right behind. There is a real little slice of life that you're not going to get to see many places.
That's right. That's pretty special.
Yeah.
So great habitat out here in these remaining ponds.
Yeah. Now we are up to, is this number 6?
Yep.
I've only walked this trail 100 times and I still cannot remember which pond I'm on. And this one is notice what you notice is not a pond. There is no pond nearby, but there's a remnant of a solid foundation, but who knows for what. This is a substantial couple feet high and probably 5 feet square. But what is it for? Don't know. And near this spot, there is a particularly lovely, I think lovely, even though it doesn't necessarily show it in this picture, but I called it a belvoir. Pretty view because it overlooks a particularly pretty quarry, which is quarry number 6, and you can sit in this belvoir and have the world in your fingertips. God's in his heaven and all's well in the world. And I was taking a couple of family friends along the path and showed them this. And unbeknownst to me, they put together a little concert and hired a couple of young violinists from Kneisel Hall to come down and brought in folding chairs and folding tables, and they cleared out the rubble at the base here and played beautiful music, because as a youngster, I had walked through the woods on occasion to the sound of Kneisel Hall violinists practicing in the woods. And so this brought to my memory those occasions, which were, let's face it, folks, 70 plus years ago. And so I wept.
Yes.
And I think everyone else did too.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. Such a lovely reenactment of a special memory.
Okay. That spot, Belvoir, overlooks pond number 6, which we have I mentioned? I can't recall.
Yeah. And this one's very special because you look down on this pond from up high.
Yes.
Where a lot of the other ponds, you're right on that same level with them, and this can really show you how deep some of these quarrying outfits went into these ponds and how steep the slopes can be leading up to them.
And how dangerous it is to try and walk over and peek over the edge, because it's a substantial fall into the water.
That's right.
And this is the southernmost of the 6 quarry ponds. They're all spring fed, and this one is not owned in the Slaven family, and it does have a sign that says no swimming. But as we have already discussed, you don't want to swim in any of these quarries. So,
and so if we go across the road from these ponds, you can find the Hinckley Westcott Quarry, which is in Penny's Preserve, which is owned by Blue Hill Heritage Trust. And this is a gigantic quarry, as you can see in this photo. The hiking trail comes up along the top, but the quarry had these sheer cliff face walls and went down, down, down. And this quarry really is not full of water because it's on such a slope. You can see it over here in this map, and the slope goes down towards the bay. And so you don't have this one full of water, but it can show you just how deep and far down they really can go with these quarries. It's quite amazing. A lot of work. You can go see this quarry for yourself by going for a nice hike at Penny's.
Strongly recommend you do that. You do that.
That's right.
We all do that.
Yes.
This is an overview of this little corner of Hancock County, where all the known quarries are located. And one of the interesting things is that all the quarries are in this general area. They are not scattered about. There's apparently no granite west of Blue Hill Bay,
right?
Blue Hill Harbor, and there are lots of, as you can see, identified quarriers. However, we also think that some of them are they're called quarries because they're in the farmer's field. The farmer went out to clear his field and piled chunks of granite along the edge of his of his plowed land, and that then he was maybe able to sell, and thus he has established a commercial enterprise. There are several of these quarries, and I will mention later, if I can remember, that are identified with a specific destination. Notice one here called the Pittsburgh Post Office Quarry, which is an existing quarry in on Morgan's Bay, and is named after where the stone was taken. It was taken in Pittsburgh, where they used it to build the Pittsburgh Quarry. And you might wonder how they got it to Pittsburgh. They got it there by train.
Yes.
And anything that's off the beaten path tends to be one of the reasons that the quarrying industry in Hancock County faded after about 1927 is because the quarries were too difficult to operate, too expensive, and many of the quarries therefore shifted to using ships.
Right. And we'll get there very soon.
Shortly. As you're wandering through the woods of the Chase Granite area, you, in some instances, find structures. And this is an interesting structure. It's made of stone, but it's got a tin roof. And the tin roof is not fastened on very securely. And the old timers tell me that the reason that it's arranged this way is because they were having occasional accidents with, well, they said sticks of dynamite, but a stick of dynamite is not going to leave anything standing. So I think they were probably blasting caps. And the idea is that if you drop it and it goes off, then it'll blow the roof off, and you go out and pick it up and put the roof back on. And as most of the Chase Granite Quarries were high up on the hill, which we've just walked around, but the railroad goes downhill to the dock, but you can follow it all the way down because in most cases it's on an embankment, and this is the start of the embankment that runs for 1,000 yards maybe down the hill to the stone dock, and it follows the power line follows the path that that was used to take granite down to the stone dock. And many of you have probably seen the stone dock, and I think there's a picture of it coming up.
There is.
Yeah.
And this is more of what the old rail line was, and it's a little hard to see in the picture, but if the sun's just right, you can see the old rail ties.
You can barely make out here and here.
Yeah,
you know?
you can sort of see where the old rail ties used to be.
What you can't appreciate is the fact that this has a particular downward slope, and you wonder what, as I said before, what do you do for brakes if you're using the Gallimander, for instance?
That's right.
Or the steam locomotive.
And this is where they're headed.
This is the Slaven dock, which many of you have seen, and just beyond, a little off to the left, is Darling Island.
Yes.
Named for Chrissy's ancestor.
And so the granite would come down the rail line and out onto the stone dock, where it'd be loaded onto these large schooners.
And they're called stone schooners. And they're called stone schooners because they carry stones, not because they're made of stones. But this was, once you got the granite down the hill and big cranes lifted it out on board into the hold of these schooners, being very, very careful not to drop, the piece of stone would go right straight to the bottom, followed shortly by the schooner.
Yes.
So do not mishandle the crane.
Yeah. And we'd see these schooners in Blue Hill, and as you were just saying, you have to be very careful with the granite because it's quite hefty.
1 cubic foot, which is very close to what this is, a foot this way and a foot this way. And this one is maybe only 9 inches high, but a cubic foot of granite weighs 168 pounds. And so the laborers who were extracting the granite and generally cutting it into those squares that were used for paving stones. And some of the major cities along the East Coast have Blue Hill granite as Chase granite as paving stones.
Yes. And so this is a bit of a blurry photo, but folks can see Blue Hill Mountain, the iconic shape of the mountain in the background, and a big schooner
which I don't think is a stone schooner,
I
but
don't
it
think
is,
so.
it is a schooner. And this is Ken Fox. Ken Fox rebuilt a
The pier out here.
pier, yeah.
Yeah. There's
And
another photo of it.
there it is while it was being rebuilt. And that's pretty much what it looked like in the early 1900s when it was an important shipping point.
Yeah.
And these structures are generally called cutting sheds. And that's where the fine work is done to turn a block of granite into something decorative, worthwhile. And the granite industry was an important element of the town's commerce from about 1880s to about 1910. And the last load of granite was shipped out of Blue Hill from the other stone dock that we saw before in 1927. And that went to the Cape Cod Canal, where it was used as route to line the canal. I've never been through the Cape Cod Canal. Now, back to M.K.Chase. M.K.Chase was fairly forward-thinking, and he decided that it would be a good idea to have a company store. He had as many as 100 workers working for him from off and on, depending on the contracts they had. And so he established the store in town, which, as the name shows above the door, is still there. It's Merrill and Hinckley. It's changed significantly, but the fact that M.K.Chase established this store that has been in operation for 120 years or something like that is pretty impressive.
And Blue Hill looked pretty different back then. This is an old rendering of the town, and you can see the bay coming in here and some of the roadways. And so the store would have been here sort of in the city center. And when you look at an old photograph, this is Main Street here, and this is Union Street here, and here we have Town Hall. And you can just start to see the porch of Marilyn Hinckley right there. So very interesting. And this is a great photo from from the Blue Hill Historical Society. Really, really neat to see that.
There's a grand total of 1 telephone pole visible.
That's right.
Although the town was electrified fairly early.
Yes.
And as it says, boat building, shipbuilding was big business. And this ship, I included a picture of it because it was partly owned by one of my great uncles. And typically there was no insurance, and you insured your investment by having many investors. And this is one of the larger ships, and it is sailing vessels. It's a 3-masted schooner, as you can see, but it's.
You can see the men climbing. How small they are compared to this massive ship.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
And it's a wooden ship. Maine was very late in the game to start building steel ships. One of the ships that was built here in Blue Hill was named Herald of the Morning, and Miss Esther Wood, who was probably the town's leading historian up until her death here 20 years ago. In one of the books that she has written about Blue Hill history, has a little chapter devoted to names that Blue Hill skippers or owners gave to their vessels. And she identified them as the prettiest sounding and the least attractive. And the most and prettiest sounding was Herald of the Morning. And Esther actually saw Herald of the Morning afloat in Blue Hill Bay, but it didn't have the masts in her, and it had been converted to just being a barge to carry lumber. And so it lost its special place in the world.
So back to granite.
Granite, one of the major uses of granite is for residential construction and commercial construction. And as it happens, it was built by workmen from Chase Granite, although the architect came up from Boston, I believe. But this is the family home that the Slavens retreated to every summer. And tragically, it was taken down around 1990, I think, because made of granite, you couldn't heat it or cool it.
Right.
You couldn't run ventilation lines, so it was inefficient.
But beautiful.
But beautiful.
How nice to have this artwork to remember it.
And the artwork was done by my father.
Even more special.
Now, here are a whole bunch of destinations that have used Blue Hill granite. For instance, Pratt Institute, I think that's an Institute of Higher Learning.
It is.
I think it's an architecturally based.
Yeah, architecture or the arts. Yep. And the High Bridge.
The High Bridge, I think, is all Chase granite.
I believe so.
A whole bunch of residences showing the high degree of stonework that's required to get all these jigsaw pieces to fit together.
That's right. And not all of these are still standing in New York, but I believe a couple of them are. And hospitals. And more famously,
Stock Exchange.
Yeah, the Stock Exchange and 40 Wall Street. And we know for sure that these are made with Chase granite. Okay. And not as verified, but we'd like to believe
that the Flatiron Building in downtown Manhattan, we have a strong family tradition that it was when it was built the tallest building in New York City, and it was built with Chase granite. So it doesn't matter whether it was or not. That's what we're going to believe. That's the family.
That's right.
The family legend, and it is still standing. And I think it is
Yes.
a national historical site. Somebody, maybe it's Maury. Maury, go look at it, maybe.
Could be.
And I mentioned that the last load of shipment of granite, which was just grout, came from Chase Granite in Blue Hill, was in 1927, and it was destined to support the sides of the canal.
Right. So this area here, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Those are all just pieces of grout.
All the way from Blue Hill.
Yeah.
And of course, we see it on our home turf as well, in a lot of local cemeteries and areas around town. And this is back to the seaside cemetery where our ancestors lie.
M.K.Chase. If there's time for the story.
Let's tell the story.
The story is that M.K.Chase, when he was about 18 years old, went to sea on his, this was 1845, I think, went to sea on a ship that was captained by his father, and the first officer was a brother. And the ship was on its maiden voyage. Maiden voyage meaning his first time underway, and it was carrying a load of grain, I believe, oats, to Ireland. This is in November of 1845, and November in the North Atlantic, to cross the North Atlantic in November is no fun. I have been there and done that, and it is no fun. And they made it to within a relatively short distance, 5-10 miles or something, of the coast of Ireland. And a storm came up and it capsized the ship. And I think there were 14 men on board, including the skipper, who was M.K.Chase's father, and a brother, and other, all from Blue Hill. And the only survivor was M.K.Chase. He tied himself to the stump of a mast which had been broken off. And remember, this is November. This is not a good time to be soaking wet in the North Atlantic. And after a day or two, an Irish fishing boat came across the wreck and rescued M.K.Chase, who was the only survivor. They took him back to their home port, and I forget what it is, but it's on the extreme western, maybe it's Bantry Bay, extreme western edge of Ireland. And to bring him back, to warm him up, they put him in the cattle shed with the dairy cows, and the heat from the dairy cows brought him around, so that he was, after don't know how long, but he was then able to support himself, and found his way to a major seaport where there was a U.S. consulate. The U.S. consulate has funds for shipwrecked sailors to get them back to the United States. And so they got M.K.Chase, but I gave him enough money for him to buy a ticket to get back. He sailed from wherever it is in Ireland to New York City, and made it from New York City by train to Boston, and then I think by foot from Boston to Blue Hill. And by this time, the city, Blue Hill, the town, the county, knows that the ship has been lost, because it's been a long time that they haven't heard from it. And they were having a memorial service, and I think it was the Baptist church, maybe it was the Congo church, a memorial service for all the men from Blue Hill who went down on it. And M.K.Chase arrived in the middle of this service. Now that's the story, and we have to support that story, but that is just so, it's unlikely. But no, he not only arrived, but he laid eyes for the first time on his bride-to-be, whom he had never seen before. She was the daughter of a North Blue Hill farmer who had never seen blue water before. And he married her. And a couple of years later, M.K.Chase was given command of another ship named the Sarah Snow, I think. And he took that ship on his maiden cruise from, I think, Boston to Bahamas, carrying grain for the king's horsemen who were stationed in the not the Bahamas, Bermuda. And they got off the Jersey coast, which is off the Jersey shore, which is notorious for bad winds. And I'll be damned if the ship didn't take a knockover, just like the first one did. And this time, however, they cut away the rigging and another ship came by, a British steamship. This is now 1870. A British steamship came by and rescued all the crew. They all survived. And so that was M.K.Chase's bride's introduction to going to sea.
Because she was on the boat.
She was first time she had ever been on a boat.
First and last, maybe.
First, no, you would think first and last, but actually she then went to sea with her husband and they had children, one of whom was Mary Ellen Chase's father.
There we go.
We have gone full circle.
Excellent. So I found a cute little state of Maine made out of granite as our thank you. And
Yeah.
thank you, Bob, for...
There's Penobscot Bay.
That's right. Excellent. All right.